Jay Bird shows the Hells Angels proof that he had just killed a rival biker from the Mongols.
And he goes to the box and he pulls some stuff out and he comes to the Mongol vest and he's got his back to everybody. And Joby says, "Whoa." And then one of the Hells Angels says, "Well, what is it?" And he turns around and he's like, "It's a Mongol cut." And there's blood dripping down it. And then they start passing it around, and then they start looking at the pictures and they start talking about it. Like, "Hey, how'd you do it? Like, did you hit him here? And it looks like the back of his head was blown out." And they're like completely fascinated by this murder. Now, prior to the delivery of the fabricated murder, I told my partner, an officer named Bill Long, who went by the name of Timmy in the case. He was with me when we delivered this. And so we were bringing these Hells Angels into our trailer to show them that we had committed a murder. And we didn't know what the reaction was going to be. We didn't know if it would be embraced or if they were going to feel like compromised because now they had become we had made them accomplices in a murder.
Welcome to Game of Crimes.
Yeah. And you're saying the bus signal for the third time, and people go, "Why do you keep asking where Bugs Bunny is?" You know, that's the third.
Uncle Charlie. Hey, well, who's Uncle Charlie? Well, you'll find out here in about 30 seconds.
Yeah. Hey, but Steve, real quick too, you used not an acronym this time, but you said Kell unit.
Yeah, so that's the name of a piece of equipment that it's a wireless recorder as well as a wireless transmitter. So when you're working undercover, you can wear it under your clothes or up your rear end or wherever. And hopefully your cover team can hear what's going on.
Well, Steve and Morgan, maybe yourself too, and I'm dating myself a little bit. I do not like looking at myself as an old guy, but I'm 60 years old now. So I guess I am. But when I first started working undercover, we were still using Nagra tape recorders.
Reel to reel.
The Nagra reel to reel, and duct taping that in the small of your back. And people don't get that today with the advancement of technology and how important technology is into capturing electronic evidence, both audio and video, and how amazing it is today. We had little mini reel-to-reel tape recorders that we were duct taping in the small of our back and using those to record the audio of illegal undercover transactions.
And how many times did those batteries get so hot it burned your skin?
Right, and then peeling that duct tape off, raw skin. You're pulling hair and skin off, trying to get the recorder off. And you know what? Actually, I look back at those days now, with a very romantic view of it. It was like, man, those were the good old days.
Those were the golden days. Yes.
Those remember when they first came out with the page just before cell phones, they created a pager that had a hidden microphone. And so that was your new Nagra unit, that you could transmit your wireless transmitter so surveillance could keep up with you. And that was just the coolest thing in the world. But they might have been a little bit bigger. They might have looked a little weird. But it was cool stuff.
Well, again, and I know I'm dating myself, but I think it's a demonstration of the evolution of technology is that when I first started, we didn't have cell phones. If you wanted to call a bad guy, I kept a Crown Royal bag of quarters in my car, and you found a payphone, and you went and called the bad guy using quarters, man. There was no you were hoping to catch him at home, or you weren't IMing people or texting people or using social media to contact. You were getting on an AT&T Bell telephone and putting quarters in it and having conversations on the phone.
Yeah. We had an undercover case one time. We're working with the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. We sent the UC out. Speaking of recorders, had one of the micro cassette recorders with a real nice mic and stuff. We said just put it in your jacket pocket because he wasn't going to get searched. We knew that, but go up there, do the deal, come back. So he brings his tape back. We turn it on, and all we hear is. He was wearing a nylon jacket. One of our lessons learned: you never put a very sensitive microphone inside the pockets of those nylon jackets because that's all we heard was.
One of my favorite undercover stories is I was partnered with an ATF agent named Darren Kozlowski, who was when I talk about people that I wanted to be like and who were super just amazing undercover agents. I wanted to be like Koz. He was one of my peers, and technology had advanced to the point where there was a recording a recorder that was placed in a key fob, like a car opener. And we just all thought that was the coolest thing ever. And Kaz had one. Kaz had this recorder key fob. And we're meeting with a guy on an undercover deal. And the dude is wearing a cutoff shirt, and it's a pretty nice shirt, but he's cut the sleeves off it, and he's got a string hanging off of it, off the side of it. And he's like, man, does one of you guys have a knife or something, or some scissors that I can use to cut this string? I'm afraid if I pull it, it's going to fray my shirt. And Kaz holds up his key fob. He's like, I don't have a knife, but I got a freaking tape recorder inside my car alarm. And the dude looked at him like, what? And I looked at Kaz like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? And he's like, man, they don't know what this is. This ain't ever going to make any sense to them. And the dude, it just blew right over his head. He had none of us knew what that was.
Oh, that's pretty wild.
Oh man, that's where you're doing that. Well, let's get back into talking about, because the other thing I want you to talk about
Kaz is this character when like the boys are sitting around the campfire, and there's 100 beer cans on the ground. Kaz is the guy who was like, look, I don't know about the rest of you guys. Like, I ain't getting hit by a bus, and I'm not having a heart attack at my desk. When I go out, I'm going to go out duct taped to a freaking folding chair with some bad guy putting a sawed-off shotgun in my mouth. I ain't going out any other way. That was the nuts job Kaz that my partner was.
And that's the guy you wanted to emulate?
I wanted to take his good things, and I wanted to distance myself from his risky things.
That's why we do these interviews virtually instead of in person. Nothing personal, Jay Bird.
No. Yeah, we don't know what's going to be coming. Hey, talk real quickly about the origin now. Every operation has to have a name. So you guys came up with the Operation Black Biscuit. And I got to tell you, I thought it was one thing until I read the book. Then I realized something totally different. So how did you come up with the name Black Biscuit?
Well, when Joe Slatella, when Slats said, hey, we're going to call this Operation Black Biscuit, my first question was, dude, that's racist. Like, I don't think you can put that on a report. He's like, dude, it's not racist. Slats was a huge hockey fan. And he's like, Black Biscuit is a hockey puck. And I'm like, what does that have to do with infiltrating the Hells Angels? And he's like, dude, you're not getting it. It has nothing to do.
Yeah, that's the point.
Infiltrating the Hells Angels. Like, anybody that reads this, anybody that picks up a report that says Operation Black Biscuit on it, like, there's no red flag there. Like this is part of our internal security to try to keep this underground. And now Slats, real quick on Joe Slatella, the guy who was my case agent was an absolute brilliant traditional investigator. The smartest investigator that I ever personally crossed paths with. I've said this many times publicly and privately. If my kids were kidnapped and we didn't know where they were, and I could pick one cop to go find them and do justice for them, it would be Joe Slatella.
That's a hell of a compliment.
Yeah, well, let's hope we don't have to prove that point. So keep the fingers crossed. But but you bring up a good point too. There's a lot of reasons, whether it's the FBI or the CIA or whatever, you got to give operations code name, because operation code name is not going to be infiltrate Hells Angels and arrest everybody. That kind of gives it away, right? But or some people are too smart for their own good. We won't call it Hells Angels, but we'll call it biker madness or something like that. Nah. Just I like Black. I was thinking Black Biscuit. It's like somebody's bad cooking, or I was thinking of not a hockey puck, but maybe an explosive or something. But no, but that's pretty cool. So you come up with that. When does this operation start kicking into gear? And then start giving us an idea about how you start developing these roles. Because one of the things I thought was really interesting, you could spend a lot of years. We had a master class on gangs, outlaw motorcycle gangs, the previous episode from Steve Cook. And we talked about, everything from the hangarounds, or the associates to the hangarounds to the prospects to becoming a fully patched member. That could take you a long time. You're not allowed to have an unlimited amount of time to do these investigations. So how do you balance the need for speed with not wanting to get caught up in the process of becoming an associate or a hangaround or prospect? Because quite frankly, if you were any of those roles, you're nothing but somebody's bitch for a year and a half.
Morgan, you hit it on the head. Is that in law enforcement, the clock is ticking when you start an investigation. You don't have forever to acquire contraband and then let that lead to arrests and convictions. You have to work fast, and you have to overcome what we talked about earlier, that unique paranoia You're trying to get next to people who don't want to be gotten next to. You haven't grown up with these guys. You don't have years of trust established with them. You have to work quickly, which is why it's so important to make a good first impression. You get one chance to make a first impression, and you have to get it right if you want to advance the case with any speed. Slats built this master plan to some extent around my role that I had previously been serving as this debt collector gun runner in Bullhead City. I had already had overlap with the Hells Angels. They knew me like as a street thug, as this white trash, Peckerwood gangster that was in Bullhead City. But it didn't have a biker element to it. Slats developed an informant that was associated with a biker gang, not associated, was a member of a biker gang in Tijuana, Mexico. And Slats had this informant compromised, and he agreed to help introduce our undercover team to this biker gang in Tijuana, Mexico called the Solo Angels, which were their own outlaw 1% criminal biker organization. And so we used that informant. We used his introductions and basically strong-armed our way into the Solo Angels, not to investigate the Solo Angels, but to use their patch and to use their notoriety for credibility in the eyes of the Hells Angels that we were part of that world, that we were part of that environment, that Jay Bird wasn't just this rogue debt collecting gun runner that had a house in Bullhead City. He was actually attached to an outlaw biker gang that was real and believable and credible.
And that also accelerated the investigation too, because to your point, you don't have to start off as an associate, and hang around or prospect. You're a fully patched member of Solo Angels. And so now you've got that, in a sense, respect. They may not consider you an equal at that point, but they respect you because you're fully patched. You've got your own gang. How much did that help advance the speed of the investigation by taking that angle?
Well, we skipped a lot of steps. Because we had created credibility in the outlaw biker gang world. The Hells Angels would never look at the Solo Angels as their equals, but we were at least peers in that world. And so it gave us the opportunity to ride with them, to attend their parties, to go to their clubhouses, and to do it, without showing up in a pickup truck. Now we were showing up in motorcycles with gang vests on and formatted in a way they understood. And we knew exactly who we were as Solo Angels. We knew that we were like, the disregarded second cousins of the Hells Angels. We were fine with that. And we just played with it. I mocked and mimicked and tried to repeat everything I saw the Hells Angels doing as a Solo Angel. And I was open about it. I was like, you guys, the Hells Angels, you guys are the king of the mountain. You guys are who everybody who rides a motorcycle in a biker gang someday dreams and hopes to be. So when I see you do something, I do it. When I see you act a certain way, I act that way. You got I played into that ego of the Hells Angels and made them feel like they were the king of the mountain and acknowledged to them that I understood that they were like the absolute top shelf 5-star players in the biker gang world.
But at the same time, you're also showing respect, and that's what it's about, right?
Give respect to get respect, no doubt.
Let's talk real quickly about the origin of Solo Angels, because I was just making the contrast. Hells Angels, Solo Angel. Was there any, from a historical aspect, the naming of the gang to, in a sense, pay homage to the Hells Angels, or did that come up just organically? It had nothing to do with HA?
Yeah, I don't believe there was any overlap or there was any design behind that. I could be wrong in the history of the Solo Angels. All I know is that they were like a one gang outfit based in Tijuana, Mexico. Most of their membership was Hispanic. They had a few white boys in it. And this informant took me and my partner to meet with the leadership of the Solo Angels. And to some extent, well, not even to some extent, to full extent, we extorted our way into the Solo Angels. We knew that we needed their patch for credibility in the eyes of the Hells Angels. And so the Solo Angels were like a broke down gang. They didn't have much money. They didn't have much going on. And we promised that by allowing us to be Solo Angel members outside of their area of operations in Tijuana, Mexico, to take that name to, into the Hells Angels world, that one, we were going to be tying them and putting them next to the premier outlaw biker gang on the planet, the Hells Angels, and that we would feed money down to the Solo Angels so that they could throw parties and improve their clubhouse and do all those things. Ultimately, that cover story blew up on us, like by my own error, by my own failure. But that's at least where we started.
Yeah, but I'm looking at their patch right now. That chopper, that motorcycle on their back is kind of cheesy looking, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, it looks like someone drew it with a crayon.
It really does.
Or maybe it's a 63 Panhead that can barely keep up with the rest of the bikes.
But it fit that gang so perfectly, man. Yeah. It's kind of hokey looking, and there's nothing glamorous about it. But the fact that it was just kind of down and dirty and simple and recognized, like that all worked to our advantage.
And one thing I want to put in perspective too, this comes out of your book too, but also from Steve Cook. But there, you say there were 4 major outlaw clubs: are the Pagans in the East, the Outlaws in the Midwest, which I knew about being from there, the Banditos in Texas. We obviously heard about them. But the Hells Angels, what made them different is not only were they in like all over the United States, not in every state, but all over, but they were in 20 foreign countries. Steve made the point, and you made the point in your book, outlaw motorcycle gangs, especially the Hells Angels, are one of the very few criminal exports the United States has. We don't have cartels. They come in here. We don't have the mafia. They come in here. But OMGs, not oh my gods for you millennials out there, outlaw motorcycle gangs, that is an organic American export.
Cookie is spot on with that assessment, and he's got more knowledge on the history and the mechanics of all these different gangs than probably anybody, and he's 100% accurate. The Hells Angels grew from this like ragtag group, in San Bernardino, and then ultimately moved their mother chapter into Oakland. They had foresight and they had brilliance in the fact that they turned this like kind of group of misfits into an international organized crime syndicate.
It's huge. Going back to the Solo Angels, too, you talked about buying your way in. It really didn't cost you a lot of money. I mean, I think you're right. You only threw like about $3,000 at these guys, which in the terms of a long, complex investigation, that's not a lot of money. But that small amount of money basically set the stage for what became a very successful operation.
It did. It ultimately, down the road in the infiltration, it backfired on us. Because that was our promise to the Solo Angels, that we were going to get them next to the Hells Angels and give a gang that was broke down with not much to show for itself notoriety. We upheld that promise. The promise we didn't uphold is that when we started rolling with the Hells Angels, then we neglected the Solo Angels because we had gotten what we wanted from them. We were using their patch. We were wearing their patch. And I took for granted that I needed to tend to that relationship. Like any relationship, boy-girl relationships, family relationships, you have to put time and attention into them to keep them alive and thriving and to succeed. Well, I had gotten what I wanted from the Solo Angels, which was to wear their patch, and we stopped sending money to them. And we stopped catering to them, and we stopped like paying homage to their mother chapter in Tijuana. And when that happened, they got pissed, and Solo Angels went to members of the Hells Angels and said, "Hey, man, I don't know if you know who the fuck you're dealing with, man. Like we're sensing that these guys are kind of counterfeit. They promised to like feed money down here and send motorcycles down here and prop us up, and we never fucking see from those dudes. They never come down here. They're not a part of this." And that caused huge problems for us.
It's like a plant, you feed and water it, it grows great, but if you ignore it, it wilts. But that didn't happen.
If I had been smart enough to
just keep throwing a little cash at them,
that relationship, like that problem never would have came. And I took for granted that I had gotten what I wanted from them and turned that relationship into a one-way street. And that didn't go over too good over the course of time.
Yeah, but in the context of everything, that's a huge lesson that can be passed on to other investigations and stuff. It's like, just because you got what you need out of the informant or the gang or whatever, you've got to keep that relationship going until everything concludes, because you ignore it at your own peril. But so start walking us through now. Now you start launching this. You've got to start building credibility with the Hells Angels. I mean, you start doing things, so what are the goals of Operation Black Biscuit? What is it you guys are trying to build? Because you're going to talk later about making a RICO case, which is kind of that is the huge hammer that you can, that's the death sentence for a gang, is getting a RICO case made against you. So what were the goals of Black Biscuit? What were you guys trying to achieve out of this at the end?
The goal was never, at any point, at least Joe Slatella's goal was never at any point to create an infiltration. It was to do a side-by-side investigation. Because if we stayed side by side with the Hells Angels, we maintained control over what we did, where we went. We maintained control over our activities. And so initially, that's where we started. We were riding side by side these guys. We were going to their parties. We were involved in gun deals, drug deals with them as a peer club, as a support club to them, as a fan club of theirs. And so we were doing, we were just operating as an independent outlaw biker gang, the Solo Angels, who happened to be friends and side by side with the Hells Angels. Ultimately, and we were finding success in it. Like, we were making friends and we were building reputations, and we were loved and admired and respected on some levels by the Hells Angels. Then we get to that point where the Solo Angels compromise our cover story that I mentioned earlier, that we were not living up to the promises we made to them. And they made that accusation to members of the Hells Angels, where I was ultimately challenged on that. And that challenge event was not only what appeared to be the end of the case, it was a life or death meeting, really, not only in real time, in hindsight, maybe even more in hindsight. In real time, I was just trying to fight my way through the problem.
Yeah. What was your first inkling? Did you know that the guys from Tijuana were going to come up and talk to the HAs, or how did you find out?
I found out about it in a backdoor way, in a very treacherous way. My main contact into the Hells Angels, the guy I had developed the closest relationship with and who had the greatest influence within the Hells Angels, was the president of the Mesa Charter, a guy named Robert Johnston. He went by the street name of Bad Bob. And I got a call one day from Bad Bob, who said, "Hey, Jay Bird, man, we got a problem. We got a big problem, and I need to meet with you." I'm like, "Okay, well, what's up? What's the problem?" He's like, "Some of my boys talked to the Solo Angels. Dude, we've got a huge problem." And at that point, the task force that we had built, we pretty much figured the case was done. We've been compromised. And we actually started looking at our suspect board as to who's indictable, what evidence do we have, what kind of cases do we have? If we have to close down today, what kind of case can we present to prosecutors? And I made the argument. I'm like, "Man, let me try to save this." And they're like, "Dude, are you fucking kidding me, man? You're blown up. Your cover story is compromised." And I was like, "Give me a chance." And really, no one was in favor of it. I wasn't necessarily thinking. I wasn't thinking logically or clearly at that point. I was very caught up in the process, and so I went to a meeting with Bad Bob, and we found out afterwards it was actually it was going to be an assassination. I go to a meeting with Bad Bob, and he tells me "Hey, man, some of my boys talked to the Hells Angels, and you're not for real." And I relied on all that groundwork that I had built over time with Bad Bob. And I'm like, "Dude, you got bad information. Those dudes in Tijuana, those Solo Angels, they're pissed off because what they're saying is true. I didn't try to avoid the truth. We ignore those dudes. We're not sending money down there. We're not paying attention to them." All those things that he was told, I just confirmed. I didn't try to run from it. I'm like, "Those guys are fucking poo butts down there, dude. I got nothing to do with them." They are not the real deal, man. They're just around to fucking have a party and fucking ride their motorcycles. That's bullshit. That's not what I'm about. I'm about money. I'm about guns. I'm about drugs. I'm about freaking like doing the things we do. And I told Bob, I said, you need to reflect on our history. Think about all the things we've done together. Think about all the time we've spent together, the drug deals, the gun deals, all the things, all the respect I've shown you. And you tell me that I'm not for real. You tell me that you think that I'm like a fucking, what, an informant, a cop? Fuck that. You know in your heart that that's not true. You need to call off the dogs. And Bob, he's smoking and he's thinking and he's processing it. I showed him pictures of me at the Solo Angels clubhouse in Tijuana with Solo Angels hanging on me. I said, does this look like I'm counterfeit? Does this look like someone who ran a fucking game on these dudes? Picked up his phone and he called the people that were, causing problems for us and said, hey man, we need to back off. Like, I trust these dudes. The information you got is right, but it's only half right. And they've explained their position with the Solo Angels, and I believe them. Mm-hmm. And I've got these guys back. And then at that point he hung up and Bob said, here's the deal, dude. I ain't putting up with this Solo Angel bullshit. You're bringing drama into my life that I don't need. You guys become Hell's Angels, or you take that Solo Angel patch off and you never ride in Arizona again. Those are your choices. So what went from being intended to be a side-by-side investigation now was forced almost into being an infiltration.
So, so by that, if they're telling you have to join HAs, that means you've got to become a prospect, right?
Or you have to patch over.
That was the initial process. The initial promise is, hey, we're going to fast patch you guys and we're going to make this short and sweet. The reality of it is that we went to the bottom of the hierarchy. We went down to back to the hang around stage with the Hell's Angels. They were going to make us reprove ourselves. So we went from, I was the
you were the president. Yeah,
I was the pseudo president of the Solo Angels in Arizona to a Hell's Angels hangaround, which meant everything that I had done and that reputation, that title was meaningless. I was washing motorcycles and I was selling T-shirts at biker runs, and I was going out and fetching McDonald's for members who snapped their fingers. And it wasn't like, what are you going to do? It's like, I'm going to tell you what you do and you're going to go do that. No questions asked.
Hey, I don't think we covered this, Morgan, in this interview yet. Can you tell us the different phases? Because you're talking about hang-arounds, a prospect, a patch member. What's the difference for that for our listeners?
The very most basic association is just that. You're an associate. You are a friend of the gang. You maybe go to runs, you buy T-shirts, you show support for the gang. In that associate phase, members are getting to know you, you're getting to know members. If you both agree that maybe you want to make the move into the Hell's Angels, you ultimately can be awarded a hang-around title patch. And a hang-around is exactly what it says. You are hanging around the gang. You've now taken a step closer. And in that hang-around phase, the hang-around is deciding, is this the life that I want to live or that I can live? And members are looking at you or saying, is this the kind of person that we want to let even closer? You're hanging around. You move from a hang-around to a prospect phase. And as a prospect is exactly what you are. You are a prospective member. I was told when I got my prospect patch, you're a member without his patch. Every rule of this gang applies to you like it does to a member. So you're somewhere in between this.
You're kind of in purgatory. You're in no man's land. Yeah.
You're in between a hang-around and a member. You're still responsible for all the hang-around duties, all those subservient roles that a hang-around fills, but you're not a member yet. But all the rules are being applied to you. And this was, this process was very frustrating for Slats because in his design, it was never an infiltration case. And he didn't want to make an infiltration case. He wanted us to be side by side because he wanted to maintain control. Now as prospects, hang-arounds, and then as prospects, we had lost all the control. If the Hell's Angels said, I need you in San Diego in 2 days. I need you in Oakland or Los Angeles or Las Vegas. Like, we had to go. We didn't have that freedom anymore as a solo angel saying, hey, man, I'm going to take a pass on this one. We'll catch you guys when you get back. We had to go. We had lost all control.
Hey, before we get too far down on this path, I want to back up a little bit too, because this gets into the murder that you faked of one of the Mongols. But that you laid the groundwork for that a long time ago. And actually what the fun part was, if people will go back, I believe it was episode 18, as I pull up our episode list here. I believe it was episode 18. Was I right? Yes. No, I'm sorry. Episode 17 was Sherry Oz. Sherry was a Phoenix police officer who actually had a minor role in Operation Black Biscuit with you for a while. But she learned from that because they ended up faking a death later based upon the tradecraft that you guys had shown. So let's talk about this faking of the Mongol death, because you said it earlier. They were blood enemies. I mean, they were just, if you saw a Mongol, your basically sworn duty was to kill them or take care of them. So when did you lay the groundwork for what would become a very important part of your credibility later?
Real briefly, Sherry, in her humility and graciousness, may have characterized her role as a minor role, but her role was a major role. We brought some women into the case, and we can touch on that if you want to. But her role was super important, and she was super valuable. So I don't agree with her characterization that it was a minor role.
She's
I think
humble
she was
like
very
you.
important.
She's like you. She just minimizes her role because she's given a lot of credit to other people. But no, she was great. But to talk about that, because when we talked earlier, I mean, it was almost like a 2-year, maybe an 18-month. You laid the groundwork for something that you knew. Explain to people that, because I want them to understand how you laid the groundwork for something that you never knew it was going to happen. But if it happened, it might take years for this to come about.
When I first started interacting with the Hells Angels as a solo angel, as a friend of the Hells Angels, as a support club, a duck club, a fan club of the Hells Angels, I wanted to show them that I was all in for them, that I was willing to go to war for them and with them. And one of the most early questions I asked of the Hells Angels leadership is, if I cross paths with a Mongol, like, what are my instructions? What do you want me to do? Without hesitancy, without a second thought, the reaction and the answer was quick. It's your job to kill him. I took that information and I put that in my back pocket, and I held on to that for a long time. That was the mentality. If I cross paths with a Mongol, either as an associate of the Hells Angel or now as a Hells Angels hanger-on or prospect, I was expected to find a way to kill that guy. And I hung on to that, hoping someday I'd be able to put it in play, but actually planning for someday to put that in play, planning over months and years to put that information in play.
What point in the investigation did you get the chance to put this in play? Because you go through some stages. You go through from where now you're the solo angels, you're the interim president, you're the acting president, because Rudy got sideways with his nose in the junk and had to be removed from the case. So you guys staged a very authentic takedown, arrested him, felon in possession of a firearm. So you got a legitimate way for Rudy now to be out of the picture, and you take over. So at what point does it go from you get this information, hey, we're going to kill the Mongols when we find them, you go through all of this stuff, to where you have this come to Jesus talk with Bob, and he lays down the laws that if you want to do this now, you've got to come over to the Hells Angels. What point in time does this scam that you're running, basically this fake murder with Pops, end up happening during the course of this investigation?
Time was not on our side. Effort and energy and resiliency was wearing thin. We were nearing the end of the investigation. I was still a prospect. And to be quite honest, this is not a flattering statement to make of myself, but it's an honest statement. I stopped making decisions for the good of the investigation, and I started making selfish decisions for Agent Jay Dobyns, or the undercover persona of Jay Bird Dobyns.
Hey, stop right there for a second, because that is an important point I want to explore for just a minute before we get into this. At what point did that persona of Jay Bird, Jay Dobyns, take over Special Agent Jay Dobyns of ATF. At what point did you kind of have that crossover to where you started making these decisions in your own interest as opposed to the interest of the case? Because that's always a danger in a UC role. Are you actually living the role, or are you just playing the role?
Well, I had become so saturated in being Jay Bird Dobyns, and actually well before Operation Black Biscuit began. Like I said earlier, like I had 15 years of undercover experience, and I lived this same cover story over and over, repeatedly, recycled, case after case, year after year, for 15. Now at this point in time, going on 17 years. Again, this is a regrettable statement to make about myself, but being an undercover agent, being Jay Dobyns, stopped being what I did for a living, and it started becoming who I was. And that's very unhealthy, and that's very dangerous.
Yeah.
And I see it now. I didn't see it at the time. One of the most telling examples of that is I had been away from home for an extended period of time on this case, and I came home and I was in Jay Bird Dobyns role. I was gangster. And my wife told me, you cannot be gone and then show up at this house and treat me and our kids like we are your suspects on the street. And in my self-defense, I was like, I can't turn this on and off. I have to be on. People that treat undercover work like a hobby or like a part-time job end up dead. I'm not a light switch. I can't flip this on and off. And then her response was, when you come to this house, you better install a dimmer switch and dial that attitude down. And if you can't, don't come back. And that was my permission slip to go all in on the other side.
Wow.
It's terrible because it's almost at the expense of the people you really love. But that's how consuming these roles can be.
Well, you said it. You said a phrase. I don't even have to look at my notes. You said you inflicted a lot of battle damage on your family.
You know, I'll tell you a story that's, again, like so many of my stories are humiliating stories. And sometimes it's difficult to share these with, not with you guys because you guys get it, but there's an audience out there that doesn't know me, that I'll never meet, that I'll never know. And to tell stories that are humiliating is there. I have some trepidation in that. But if I don't answer your questions with transparency and honesty, then everything that I say comes under question.
Mm-hmm.
So my son, who was a young boy at the time, between 8 and 10 years old during this window of time, he would give me a rock from the yard every time I came home. Mm-hmm. I'd come home. My son, Jack, would run out, Dad, don't leave yet. And he'd hand me a rock. And over years, I'd accumulated these good luck charms from this little boy. And I kept one with me at all times. I always had one of Jackie's rocks in my pocket. I had them in my saddlebags of my motorcycle. I had them in my undercover car, my undercover house. I started handing them out to partners on the task force. And I was saying, all this violence, all this death, all these murders that are spinning around us, we're in this tornado of hatred. And there's something about the blessing on these good luck charms that Jackie's given me. Like, please, I was begging my task force partners, just keep one of these rocks with you, because I don't want anything bad to happen to anybody. So right before this Mongol murder, it's like the last big event in the case. And I'm getting ready to leave the house. And just as he had routinely done for years before, Jackie comes running up, Dad, don't leave yet. And he gives me a rock, and it was shaped like a heart. And he said, Dad, I got a rock. I've been saving this one for you. It's special. It's shaped like a heart. So I'm a 40-plus-year-old father who's trying to comfort my 10-year-old son. And I said, dude, all these good luck charms, man, they worked. I'm almost done. And when I finish this, I'm going to do all those things with you that we should have done. We're going to play catch, and we're going to go swimming, and we're going to go to the movies, and we're going to read books, and we're going to wrestle. And all those things that I haven't been doing with you, I'm going to start doing. And it's all thanks to your good luck charms. And this little boy's standing on my driveway, and with no shirt, no shoes, tears are running down his cheeks. And he said, Dad, those aren't good luck charms, and they were just for you. You should have never given them to anybody else. And I was like, I'm looking at my son, and I couldn't process where he was at. And he's like, those were for you to put in your pocket. And every time you thought someone was going to hurt you, you could put your hand in there and touch it. And that was like me being there to help you fight them. And I realized at that point what I had done to my family, what I had done to my son. And it was too late. I couldn't turn back. I had to see this through to the end. Like, my family didn't sign on for this. I had forced it on them, and I had forced it down their throat. And I was so humiliated and disappointed in myself that I had done that. But there was no turning back. I had to finish it.
You know, Murph will tell you I'm usually not at a loss for words, but man, just to see the raw emotion, and you folks can't see it, we can, because we see each other on video. In case you're wondering, are these emotions real? Yeah, these emotions are real. You know, and I can tell it's painful for you to do this, but you know what? But you have such a fantastic story, and the fact that you're willing to talk about it. This is why people want to hear your story. This is why I think we love doing this, because it's not just about, well, let's talk about the Rock'em Sock'em, which, by the way, we're two guys' names in the gang, but it's not Rock'em Sock'em. We're just not going to talk about action all the time. There is a huge story. I will guarantee you. In fact, I know by reading the book, stories like this, some of the other stuff, it's not in the book. You don't get this unless we talk to you like this.
Well, I'll tell you what, as your guest, if I don't answer questions and communicate with you guys and your audience transparently and with honesty, like I could sit here and just tell glory stories and success stories and I love me stories and pat myself on the back, but that wasn't how it was. Man, I made mistakes and I failed and I did things wrong and I have regrets. And to make this story true, like, I have to tell the dark and dirty side of it, as well as the successes. There's things I'm very proud of. There's things I'm very ashamed of. They all go in the same story.
Right. And you know what? I think that's true with most of the heroes we bring on our show. You know, and that's one thing we try to portray. And so for our listeners to know, we talked to Jay Bird about this before. We asked him about, is there anything you don't want to talk about? Can we talk about your family? And he was open right off the bat. No hesitation whatsoever. Absolutely. Because we've all been through it. We have our priorities screwed up, where our priorities should be, in my opinion, our priorities should be God, family, and the job. But what we do is we reverse those every time. We put the job first, and maybe the family comes second, and then maybe God comes somewhere along the way when we get in trouble and need help.
When I published No Angel and I asked my wife, I'm like, what'd you think of the book? She's like, what do you mean what I think about it? I said, what'd you think of it? She's like, I didn't read it. And I'm like, why didn't you read it, man? She's like, I didn't need to read it. I lived it.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I was there first person. Well, let's cycle back then. Another motorcycle term. Let's cycle back though, but let's talk about now this Mongol murder, how you staged it, because your tradecraft on this was excellent. And it was excellent for a couple of reasons. Number one, you were humble enough to say, I don't know how to stage a murder. I'm not a homicide detective. I've never worked this stuff. So how did the opportunity come up to finally do this? Because I know, like you say, you're coming towards the end of the investigation, and this is kind of, I don't want to say an ace in the hole, but this is a huge thing that you can pull that is going to, obviously help the needs of the investigation. How does this come up? So how does the opportunity now to use this piece of information that you've probably got, 18 months ago?
Well, to back up just a little bit, like, I do not like dead bodies. It's not my thing. And in the job that I did for so many years, I saw dead bodies. I was never comfortable around it, around dead bodies. I don't even like going to funerals where a mortician has prepared a body. I don't like being around dead bodies. One of the first dead bodies I saw on the job, and Steve can relate to this, like, probably dozens of times in his own experience, is that I was at a homicide scene and they popped the top off a 55-gallon barrel steel drum with a body inside that had been dosed with acid and cooked in the sun. And like the sight and the smell of that is like forever burned into my senses, right? It's not my thing, right? Now, homicide detectives who do that for a living, they see it all the time, and it's
very clinical to them. They look at it, and it's just, they can put it on one side of the brain and say, what are the facts about this? They look at the gallon, they look at the drum. Well, who made it? What color is it? They're just very factual based, but it's what they do.
been amazed by that. Like an equation to that is people that work like sex trafficking crimes and child abuse crimes. Like I hear those stories and I immediately want to go get a rifle and
save the taxpayers a lot of money. I'll save you a lot of money.
They see it so much. It's a case. It's an investigation. And man, bless their heart for the people that do those jobs, because I couldn't do that.
Well, that's episode 28 with Tricia Cannon, Georgia Bureau of Investigation. She worked a 3-year sex trafficking case on a girl who was trafficked through Backpage. And it's just, I'm saying with you, child pornography cases, stuff like that. It's like, put me in a room for 5 minutes. I'll save the taxpayers a lot of money. No need for a trial, and there will never be an appeal. But
I don't know how those people work those kind of cases and maintain any type of emotional stability for any length of time. I don't know how they do it. Bless their heart, man. Bless their heart that there's people out there that do that. They're very good at it and that are passionate about it, because they do it, I didn't have to.
And these same people are saying the same thing about you, Jay. They're going, they could not do what you do. And,
exactly,
and they're
right. I don't understand how the hell you did what you did. I mean, we're brothers. We're all brothers here. And, we know what's involved with it. That's something I could never do.
Well, I sucked at working undercover. I was the worst undercover because I looked too much like a cop. You talk about having all the tells and the look. I played a banker one time, showed a flash roll. That was it. That was the extent of my undercover work. It's like, nah, I'm not designed for this. But anyway, back to our regularly scheduled podcast with you. Let's talk about the murder now. So how did you start? What were the conditions that arose for you to be able to use this information in your hip pocket?
Well, like I said earlier, our case is winding down. We'd salvaged the compromise to our cover, and we had moved forward. We had stacks of defendants, and we had stacks of predicate acts for our RICO case, for our racketeering case. The agency was losing patience. As you guys know, supervisors and bosses, they want arrests and convictions. Extended long-term case. There's a reason why people say, why are you making a federal case out of this? Well, the analogy is because federal cases take a long time and they're extended and they're not quick, and they're complex. And so kind of everybody was running out of patience. And to be quite honest with you, I was like running out of gas too. I would have never admitted it to myself, but I was mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically drained from running with these guys day after day, 18, 20 hours a day. There was days. And I do have no shame in saying this. There was days we'd finish and I would boo-hoo cry myself to sleep in my undercover house because I was so exhausted. I'd get a couple hours sleep, charge my battery, and come back and go the next day. And boo-hoo myself to sleep that night, feeling sorry for myself, feeling pathetic, feeling like I'm not, like, what am I doing? Like, where are my family? Where are my kids? No one loves me. No one cares about me. And then try again the next day. So we're at the end of the case, and I talked about how I had started making personal, selfish decisions that weren't necessarily in line with the investigative direction or mission. I wanted to get my patch. I wanted to get that Hells Angels membership. I wanted it for me, selfishly. I didn't need to get a Hells Angels patch to make this case. It didn't make it one bit better. It didn't make it one bit stronger. The evidence and everything else that went along with it was in place. But I was determined personally, selfishly, to make one last ditch play to get inside these guys and formalize it. And so,
hey, Jay, at that point, real quick, how long had you had to extricate yourself from Solo Angels and start prospecting with Hells? How long of a time were you involved in that?
Probably a year and a year. There was probably a year as a Solo Angels and a year as a Hells Angels prospect.
And how far are you into it as the Hells Angel prospect when this goes on?
Yeah, we're getting close to the end, and all the indications are from management and the executives like, hey, you guys need to wrap this up. You guys need to wind this thing down, man. We're getting ready to pull the plug on it. There's going to be no more money left. There's going to be no more time left. Start planning your arrests and your takedown.
Well, and based on what you just said a while ago about wanting that patch, just tell our listeners how many undercover law enforcement officers had ever been patched by the Hells Angels?
Well, to my knowledge, none had been.
Right.
I don't know that I can verify that or put my hand on a Bible and say that. At least like common knowledge within the law enforcement community is that like all the other major biker gangs had at some point or other been infiltrated. The Hells Angels had not. And the Hells Angels took a great sense of pride in that no one had ever got inside their wire. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason was their own rules and protocols. You had to prospect with the Hells Angels for a minimum mandatory of 1 year before you were even eligible to be considered to be voted for membership. Mm-hmm. Other gangs, 60, 90, 120 days prospecting, you could get your patch. With the Hells Angels, part of the way they insulated themselves was that they extended the prospecting time so long, they knew that a cop couldn't ride the train that long.
They could wait you out.
They could wait you out. They were smart. They know what they're doing. So we're coming to the end. I still hadn't had a patch. I was a prospect, and I reached way back into that information that what am I supposed to do if I see a Mongol? It's your job to kill him. Mm-hmm. So it was time to make the play. And I had thought this through for years after first hearing that. So I went to the Hells Angels and I said, look, you guys know I'm a debt collector. You guys know I'm a gun runner. I run guns into Mexico. You guys know I have associations in Mexico through the Solo Angels, through my old Solo Angels connects. I got people down there. Word is there's a Mongol down there running his mouth, and he's talking shit on the Hells Angels. He's talking about how he kicked our ass at frickin' Laughlin, how he shot people up and killed people, how he's going to start running Mexican meth right up the Hells Angels' ass into Arizona, right through Nogales, right up into Phoenix, right into Sonny Barger's backyard, and there's not a fucking thing we can do about it. And I said, I love you guys. I want to be with you, and this is how I'm going to show you. I want to go down there and kill that guy. Their instant reaction was not like, whoa, hey, mate, wait a minute, man, pump the brakes. No one jerked my leash. It was like, right on, dude. That's fucking what we're talking about. Here's the gun to do it. They gave me a gun. Here's how I want you to do it. Pop him in the eye so there's no blowout. Make sure this gun stays in Mexico. Bury it. Take it apart. Disassemble it. This can never be seen again. And a pat on the back and a handshake and a hug and good luck. And so, damn. The plan was rolling, and the hierarchy was in support of it.
Who was did they know the Mongol that you were talking about?
I left that obscure. I did not identify who it was. I just said a Mongol in Mexico. I took
Is this Bad Bob you're talking to, or who are you telling all this?
I was talking to a Hells Angels member that I had befriended. I had become a prospect in the Skull Valley Charter, which was north of Phoenix, and I was talking to a pretty aggressive, very aggressive, violent Hells Angel named George Walters. He went by the name of Joby, and Joby was my main point of contact in this murder plan.
Skull Valley also was a new chapter, right? Was that one that Smitty had wanted to open up and wanted you to be a part of, or am I thinking of something different?
Skull Valley was a small charter, a small Hells Angels charter out up north and west of Phoenix, outside a town called Prescott, Arizona. Most people are familiar with that area of Sedona, the Red Rocks of Sedona. It's right outside. The Skull Valley chapter was right outside of Sedona. Very picturesque, very beautiful area.
Was it an established chapter, or was it a new one that was stood up?
It was established, but it was very small. And the reason why they sent me and my partners to prospect at Skull Valley was to pump up the Skull Valley's charter's membership numbers. They needed bodies in Skull Valley. This plan was presented. It was enthusiastically accepted by the Hells Angels. And so I went to the task force and said, look, we got a chance to make the next step here and to finish this thing off the right way. And there was like huge reluctance to the plan for obvious reasons. Slats even said to me, he goes, have you thought through the dominoes that are going to fall if you present that you killed a Mongol? Like, what the reaction is going to be, what the reaction is going to be from the Mongols, what the reaction is going to be into the Hells Angels. Like, you are going to like throw gas on this forest fire of a rivalry that's already in existence. I'll be honest with you, man. I did not care. Yes, did I think about it? I didn't care. Like, I didn't care if it reignited the gang war. Is that a statement that's flattering of a law enforcement officer? It absolutely isn't. I was making selfish decisions. But I knew it would advance our case. I knew it was a tactical decision, but I was ignoring the red flags. I was ignoring the stop signs. We decided, I told them that I was going to kill a Mongol in Mexico. The reality of it is we drove outside the desert of Phoenix. We took a member of our task force. We put a Mongol gang vest on this task force member that had been seized in another investigation.
Before you get into that detail, though, set the stage, though, because you were talking about working with a homicide detective. Tell us about the work you did so that you would understand how to stage a homicide. Because like you said, having not worked those or investigated those, it's got to be legit. It's got to pass the sniff test.
Absolutely. So, we're setting up this Mongol murder scenario. We go out, we take our victim, we dress him up, we duct tape him at his hands and his feet. We dig a shallow grave, we drag him into the grave. And now, like I said earlier, like I was not a fan of dead bodies, and I didn't have a whole lot of experience like on death scenes or homicide scenes. We recruited a Phoenix Police Department homicide detective to come out and help us build the crime scene and make it look authentic. And he used cow blood and cow parts from a butcher shop. And I told him the story that I was going to tell. And I said, I need you to make this crime scene fit my story. During my hang around and prospecting phase, I always carried a baseball bat with me. I had a baseball bat with me. I had one strapped to my motorcycle. And I told the homicide detective, the story I'm going to present to these guys is that I found this guy in a tavern. I smacked him in the head with my baseball bat, knocked him out, busted his head open, stuffed him in the trunk of a car, drove him out to the desert, duct taped him up, buried him in a shallow grave, shot him with the gun that Joby gave me, and then took some pictures of it. So this homicide detective builds this crime scene, which has a lot of blood around the head and some brains oozing out of the skull, which were built from these cow parts that were obtained from a butcher shop. And it wasn't like it wasn't as nasty as I thought it should be. Or it was supposed to be.
You were thinking of too much of the movies, right? There's going to be body parts everywhere and blood spattering, and
yeah, it wasn't this crazy, wicked butchering that I expected. And I said, "Dude, are you sure?" And he's like, "Do you know what you're doing, or do I know what I'm doing?" And I'm like, "Dude, man, that's why we brought you here, dude. I trust you,
One of the most important parts, though, I think you're probably going to get to it, right? But if you're going to kill a Mongol, there's one thing a Mongol has that proves he was a Mongol.
We had him dressed in a Mongol vest, and we put him face down in this shallow grave. And so there's blood splatters on the vest, and we take pictures of this crime scene, and we kept evidence of our fabricated murder. We cut the vest off the back of our victim with the blood stains on it. We took Polaroid pictures of the murder scene.
And just so folks know, when you say vest, that was a cut. That actually came from a real case. This was seized. It was a real Mongol, what they call cut, right? From a real case. That's what made this so authentic.
Prior to our Hells Angels investigation, another ATF agent in Los Angeles by the name of Billy Queen had infiltrated the Mongols. He wrote a book about it called Under and Alone, a really great book about his adventure infiltrating the Mongols. But ATF had in its possession Mongols vests that had been seized in Billy Queen's Under and Alone investigation. So we dressed our victim up, like I said, made it look like this scenario had been created, took pictures of it. The homicide detective, before we put those pictures in play, took them to his weekly homicide detective meeting, spread them out in front of his homicide detective peers, and said, without letting the cat out of the bag, do any of you guys have a John Doe in the desert? Like, I caught this case and I really don't have much information. I don't have many leads on it. So all these homicide detectives, these experienced homicide detectives, were looking over these pictures. And once he was convinced that those detectives believed that the pictures were authentic, then he let them off the hook. He said, "Hey, time out, guys. I had to run a little game on you here. This is actually a fabricated, faked homicide that some undercover agents are going to use to put in play with some suspects. I had to test drive these in front of you first to make sure that they were credible and authentic before we put these in the hands of our suspects. So we had double checked that. So I took the evidence of the murder, put it in a FedEx box, addressed it from an address in Mexico, and sent it to my undercover house. I called the Hells Angels and said, hey, you know what? My business is done. Like, we need to meet. And 4 Hells Angels show up at my undercover trailer that was in Skull Valley. And I hand them a FedEx box, and they're looking at me like, what's this? I'm like, open it, go check it out. Well, one of the Hells Angels, the guy that gave me the gun, Joby, takes the box and he turns his back to the group of us and he starts peeling open the FedEx box. And
now, is your trailer wired for audio and sound? I mean, everything, sound and video?
Okay. It is. This is all being recorded. And he goes to the box and he pulls some stuff out and he comes to the Mongol vest and he's got his back to everybody. And Joby says, whoa. And then one of the Hells Angels says, well, what is it? And he turns around and he's like, it's a Mongol cut. And there's blood dripping down it. And then they start passing it around, and then they start looking at the pictures and they start talking about it. Like, hey, how'd you do it? Like, did you hit him here? And it looks like the back of his head was blown out. And they're like completely fascinated by this murder. Now, prior to the delivery of the fabricated murder, I told my partner, an officer named Bill Long, who went by the name of Timmy in the case. He was with me when we delivered this. And so we were bringing these Hells Angels into our trailer to show them that we had committed a murder. And we didn't know what the reaction was going to be. We didn't know if it would be embraced or if they were going to feel like compromised, because now they had become we had made them accomplices in a murder. And I told Timmy, I said, dude, no matter what happens here tonight, whatever goes down, do not let any of these dudes get behind you. You make sure that you keep your field of view with everybody in front of you in case this breaks bad. Because I didn't know what the reaction was going to be. And there's like this pause, and the president of the Skull Valley Charter said, well, Jay Bird, you know what we got to do now. And I was like, ooh, this isn't going the way I wanted to. I was thinking he was going to we got to eliminate you guys. And then from behind me, a Hells Angel puts his vest on my shoulders. He said, you took care of business. TCB, welcome to the Hells Angels. You're a Hells Angel now. And it was hugs and kisses and celebration. And then we left my trailer. We took all this evidence to the Skull Valley Clubhouse, and they burned all the pictures in a bonfire. They cut the Mongol vest into tiny little 1-inch swatches and burned them one at a time, destroying all the evidence. And so, they were smart. They were getting rid of the evidence of the murder. They're like, when we delivered the murder evidence, there was 1 million questions, which we'd all rehearsed and we'd gone through on our gauntlet that we talked about earlier. What if they ask this? What if they ask that? What are you going to say to this? What are you going to say to that? It's impossible to cover every possible scenario, but we'd done a pretty good job, and we sold the murder convincingly to murderers that we had killed on behalf of the gang.
Let's talk about that, because this is something that to this day, we found out from talking to Steve and you in the pre-call. Hells Angels denies that you ever became a patch member, but let's talk about when they put that jacket on the back of you, or the cut on the back of you. It still would require a vote by somebody, right? But the fact that the president of Skull Valley, Joby, right? You said?
The actual president of Skull Valley was a guy named Teddy Toth.
Okay,
his vice president was a guy named Bobby Reinstra. Bobby Reinstra was my club dad. Bobby Reinstra was my sponsor into the gang. Joby, who gave me the gun, was the sergeant at arms. And then there was another member, a fourth full patch member named Rudy Jaime, who was like our little drug dealer thug in Skull Valley. All 4 of them were there.
So where would the vote have to take place, and who would vote on it to make you a full patch now?
So they put the patch on me and Timmy, and they're like, welcome to the gang. You guys are Hells Angels now. They said, like, now we need an international vote. Like, you guys are still outside that 1 year prospecting period. Like, we need to get a vote to do this because we can't circumvent the policies and protocols of the Hells Angels. We're going to get you in, but we got to get a vote. There was a Hells Angels World Run scheduled for a short time into the future in Laconia, New Hampshire. And me and Timmy were both told, you're going to escort Sonny Barger as bodyguards to Laconia, and we're going to take the vote. And Joby said, don't worry about this. I'm going to lobby for this. I'm going to go around to all the West Coast charters. I'm going to make sure that they know exactly what happened. Like, this is a no-brainer. But once we had delivered the fabricated murder, it was not only enough for the case, it was too much for ATF's management. It was too much for ATX executives. We had, in their eyes, we had gone too far. We had overplayed our hand, and they were like, you know what, you're done. Like, we're closing this thing down. We don't need any more. We got all the defendants we need. We've got all the predicate acts for a RICO. We've got all the supporting charges. And so in essence, what I believed was advancing the case and was going to continue the case and was going to put us in a position to really do the most damage was actually brought about the official end of the case. My plan backfired.
Well, yeah, you might look at it that way. We might say, hey, still at the end of the day, we'll find out the resolution of it. You did a lot of good, but
so Morgan, when the Hells Angels say, hey, look, you know what? He was never a Hells Angel. He was never sanctioned. He never received a vote. They are 100% correct. There's no lie in that. We never got to the point where they could vote on whether we were officially sanctioned worldwide as Hells Angels members. But in that trailer with the 4 members of the Skull Valley hierarchy leadership saying, you're Hells Angels now, and you're.
But you're also going to be Sonny Barger's bodyguards. And for the folks that might not quite know who Sonny is, Sonny, give us just a quick bio of Sonny Barger.
Sonny Barger is the iconic leader of the Hells Angels. From he didn't invent the Hells Angels. But he was, from the late 50s, was the figurehead and the most worldwide renowned, iconic biker on the planet. Doesn't matter what gang, who you are, everybody and anybody knows who Sonny Barger is. And he's responsible for the internationalization of the Hells Angels, for the expansion of the Hells Angels. That they've become, as we said earlier, a worldwide international crime syndicate. That is due to the leadership and foresight of Sonny Barger.
So you might say that Sonny Barger is to Hells Angels what Steve Jobs was to like Apple and technology. Just took him to a whole new level.
I've said many times that if Sonny Barger had used his powers and skills and charm and charisma for good, he would be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company.
But the point I'm making there is they can say all they want, but the point about it is if they did not have the utmost trust and if it was not a shoo-in that you were going to be voted in, they would not let you within a state, in the same state as Sonny Barger, much less riding and accompanying him to Laconia, right?
If they didn't believe it, if they didn't believe us, or if they felt like they were tricked, it would have ended right in that trailer.
Yeah, a couple shots, that would be the end of it. And as we've established already, you were working without a cover team, so we may not have found you for a while.
Well, I would have ended up buried in a shallow grave, duct taped.
You already told them how to do it because you showed them the pictures.
Well, you know what? And I understand their reaction. No, you know what? No one likes to be tricked. No one likes to be humiliated. No one likes to be betrayed. Anybody that's ever suffered a betrayal, even if it's just, you're in high school and your girlfriend decides that like she's going to go out with somebody else. No one likes how that feels to be tricked. And from ground zero, over the course of 2 years, we had built trust. And then the trust turned into loyalty. In some cases, the loyalty turned into love. There's no doubt in my mind that, and I was even told this by members of the Hells Angels when they found out who I really was. I would have stepped in front of a bullet for you. There was a Hell's Angel who was reluctant to cooperate, and I came into an interview room and said, "Dude, man, I'm sorry," and I felt bad. I felt like I was the betrayer, and I didn't have some weird sense of satisfaction in that. Like I had a part in like damaging this person's life. Like they did it to themselves. I was present for things that brought them to that point and reported those things, but I didn't feel good about it. I never celebrated or like ever at any point in my career, I never mocked someone in handcuffs. Like being in handcuffs is a humiliating experience. Like oftentimes we're meeting people and spending time with them on the very worst day of their life.
Hey,
and this guy told me, he said, "You know what? When you just told me you're an ATF agent, that's the first true words you've ever spoken to me in 2 years."
Hey, well, Jay, let me ask you about that. How much of that guilt did you feel because you were more Jay Davis than Jay Dobyns? Had you remained more Jay Dobyns than Jay Davis, would you have still felt the same way when you made the arrests?
You know, I from my perspective, you know, when you spend an extended amount of time with people, these guys, like I lived with these guys. I broke bread with them. They slept at my house. I slept at their house. I spent holidays with them. I held their babies. I got to know their families. You see sides of their life, the criminal sides of their life that are despicable and that you have no tolerance for. But you also see aspects to their life where they're human and they're human beings and they're people and they're in the situation they're in because of the choices they've made and the circumstances they've created for them. So I don't think even in an undercover role, regardless of how immersed you get in it, you can ever eliminate, you can't undercover out the human factor. Like you grow feelings for people, you grow affection for people. I didn't take any sense of satisfaction in in being a guy who was train wrecking their life. I didn't celebrate that. I had a job to do. I did it the best I could. My job was to get next to these people, learn of their crimes, and report back out to case agents and prosecutors and juries and judges. My job wasn't to wreck anybody. My job was to investigate, and I just did it the best I could.
You know, reminds me, we had Lou Velozzi, you know, your buddy too, on for episode 4. And one of the toughest things he said, he didn't want to be present at a lot of these things because, to your point, you worked with these folks. But Steve, if you remember too, the one I remember was talking about when they had that storefront set up and they had that guy working in there that was dealing crack, I think it was. But he was such a good guy. He was working really hard for him. And then they had to arrest him. Lou, I mean, I remember Lou saying, man, that just tore him up. He did not want to be there for that because it hurt him so much to see this guy get arrested because he had poured his heart and soul into working it. Even though they were doing bad stuff, he was still a good guy and working hard. And it was just, it's not something he wanted to be there for.
You know, one of the things I learned is, and I include myself in this, is that none of us are probably quite as ever good or quite as ever bad as people might think.
Yeah, there's a very interesting Chinese thing to bring up here. Have you ever seen the yin and the yang symbol, you know, the black and the white? It's exactly to your point. If you look in there, and this is what I didn't realize this till I looked and I was told the story. So if you look in each one, in the white one, there's one spot of black, and in the black one, there's one spot of white, which means in every evil person, there's some good, and in every good person, there's some evil, exactly to your point. And that's what makes this go round like this. I mean, so let's talk about the aftermath. When did they pull the plug in relation to when you were supposed to be going to Laconia with Sonny and the gang?
Almost immediately. I mean, literally within days. The doors were being crashed, the flashbangs were going off, the SWAT teams were in play, raids were being conducted, arrests were being made. Ultimately, I believe we indicted and arrested 55 Hells Angels and associates. 16 of them were on RICO charges. 2 of them were on capital murder charges for the murder of Cynthia Garcia. They were death penalty candidates. So on the surface, at the conclusion of the investigation, on the surface, although I felt like there was still more work to do, I did not want to quit. I did not want to step out. I wanted to take this new role and expand on it. But at that time and place, it was considered a successful investigation.
What was Slats? Did Slats want it to stop, or did he want it to continue?
I think Slats was content where we were at, and the investigation had skewed so far away from his original plan, from his side-by-side plan to an infiltration plan, that he had become uncomfortable with the level of risk and danger and violence that the people that were working for him on his task force were like walking into every day. Mm-hmm. So I don't think Slats wanted it to end, but I do believe that Slats was feeling a lot of personal liability. And like, we were really pressing the envelope. It was like, I think all of us felt like, man, it's only a matter of seconds, minutes, days before something breaks bad for us.
Yeah. And when it does, just that door on that opens up and then it really goes bad. Hey, I wanted to ask you though, too, because there's a little bit of a aha here that some folks, if they haven't read the book, which they should, we're pimping out your book. We told you we'd pimp you out. You know, we'll pimp you out all day long, right? But you got to read the book. But something there, we said that very few, you came as close as anybody ever has to becoming voted in, fully patched member of the Hells Angels. But there's another thing that's very tough to do with Hells Angels, and that's to flip somebody. And you guys had actually flipped somebody because of the Garcia case. And that was kind of your in on this too, because I tell you, in all my years, I never knew that a Hell's Angel had been ever successfully flipped.
Well, and I'll tell you, it ultimately was the downfall of our prosecution. Informants, Hell's Angels informants, had been created out of this case and out of other cases. Our case goes to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and they're preparing for prosecution, and then they find out that the case actually continued in a more traditional investigation by monitoring informants that were wired informants that were having conversations with defendants and were attending Hells Angels meetings. Slats and ATF agents who had recruited and developed these informants had promised them, like, we are not going to compromise you. Like we need your help, and you're working off charges and you're working to help us, but we are not going to compromise you. The attorneys found out about it and then ordered all that information, all that subsequent information from the closing of the undercover operation that continued forward, all of that to be disclosed and those informants to be disclosed. And it turned into an internal war on the good guys' side, the prosecutors versus the case agencies versus DOJ versus ATF on how the case was going to be presented. And these internal arguments ultimately sank what could have been a pretty glorious prosecution into one that became average.
What do you mean? What happened? What should have happened versus what did happen?
Well, in this dispute over disclosure of evidence, members of the U.S. Attorney's Office accused Joe Slatella of withholding evidence from them. Joe then accused them of inappropriate investigative techniques and orders and instructions. And when you have both of the main players on the good guys' side, like documenting that each side feels the other is conducting themselves in an unethical way,
that's a heyday for the defense
to take that case into a courtroom.
The defense attorneys are going to eat that for breakfast, lunch, and dinner all day long.
And what was sad and is like, I still have I'm not resentful, but I still have some hard feelings for, is that when that case blew up and the defense attorneys, like, charges started being reduced and charges started being given up,
dismissed.
From the perspective of a defense attorney, knowing that this was an undercover driven case, their assumptions were logical, which was, there's got to be something bad about these undercover guys. Why would they spend all this money and all this time and start dismissing charges and reducing charges? They didn't know the internal mechanics of why that was taking place, but their assumption as to why was a logical one. And when the allegation or insinuation that somehow this case crashed behind unethical conduct of the undercover agents, that was not true. That case is every bit as prosecutable today and winnable today based on testimony, agent testimony, evidence, thousands of hours of recorded audio and video conversations. Like that case could be taken into a courtroom today and won. But the fact that the insinuation somehow was laid at the feet of myself and my undercover partners, I felt that was very unfair, because we did our best. Did we do everything right? No, we didn't. Were we perfect every day? Far from it. But that wasn't our responsibility. That case crashed. But publicly, we were left holding the bag for it.
Yeah, because nobody ever blames the attorneys and stuff. They always go back and they want to blame the cops. It's like, hey, we didn't write the laws. We don't write the judicial rules, and that was a struggle we had too, is that, why are you making this deal? Why are you doing this? We got to, this is, to your point, when you've got video and audio, when you've got a signed confession, you've got a rights waiver that's signed, you've got everything by the book, you got 10 people as witnesses, and they want to reduce charges, you're going, but then who do they blame? Well, the police let this guy go. No, the police didn't let this guy go.
Right.
But that distinction is lost on most people. The courts let him go. The attorneys made a deal. Cops don't make deals. We're not authorized to come in and make deals.
The people on the good guys' side of this situation, they knew exactly what happened and how it happened. And no one was willing to come to our defense of the undercover team. No one was willing to step up for us. They were content to let us hold the blame for the failed prosecution or the reduced prosecution. And so that's like, I've gotten over it, and I understand like the mechanics of how things work, but I just thought that was very unfair.
Are you talking about the ATF brass? Did they leave you swinging in the wind?
And DOJ brass.
Yeah.
They all knew how it went down, and they were content to just let us hold the bag for the blame and walk away.
Was there any indication to you that there could have been payoffs or something to some of the attorneys on the good guys' side?
You know what? I don't think so. I don't think there was anything that was like criminal. I don't even know that there was anything unethical. I think both sides were right, and I think both sides were wrong. I think the attorneys wanted every single piece of anything that touched this case for disclosure. I think the ATF case agents were like, we don't have to disclose everything to make this case. We can build the case on what we got. There's more cases to be built behind this if you continue to let us run. Their failure and the inability to cooperate on both sides of that is what ultimately did it in. But like I said, I think both sides were justified in their position, and both sides were wrong in their position, and they couldn't find common ground.
Yeah. Well, the reason I kind of asked about that is this sets the stage for something where you guys got sideways too on another issue, because that is your next book. And give everybody just a quick primer on this next book that you wrote, and tell us when it came out. And then, because this sets the stage for what I would just call retribution.
Yeah, I wrote a follow-up book to No Angel called Catching Hell, a true story of abandonment and betrayal. And that title and that subtitle, like, for anybody that reads it, I think will have understanding of my meaning. Catching hell, from catching footballs as a young man to catching hell as an agent to catching hell in the aftermath of the Hells Angels investigation. A true story of abandonment and betrayal, the subtitle. I was ultimately abandoned and betrayed by my agency that I work for, but it actually goes deeper than that. I think people that read it will see some very personal chapters in there. And I'm very open and transparent and honest over the fact that during this process, I had abandoned and betrayed my family. So it wasn't necessarily accusatory. That title wasn't accusatory at one person or an agency. I was also accusing myself of abandonment and betrayal. I had put pretty much everything that had to do with me in front of my family. And I found in this abandonment and betrayal theme that the people that loved me the most, the people that cared about me the most, the people that were my biggest fans were the ones that I treated the shittiest. And that was my family.
Unfortunately, they catch hell because of the jobs we do.
walk us through that, because you kind of got sidelined. Was that a direct result of the Hells Angels case, or was there something else that came up? Because you got moved out of your UC role into what we talked about being a NIBIN coordinator, the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network, which, ATF, obviously the experts on ballistics and stuff, that's a great thing, but that's kind of like being moved from the first string to the practice squad.
Well, I'll tell you what happened is when the case closed and moved forward in prosecution, during the discovery process, my true identity was revealed. And that's not unexpected. That's part of the court system in the United States. That's what makes living here and being a citizen of this country beautiful, is that we have the ability, the constitutional right to face our accusers. Mm-hmm. So they had the right to know that Jay Davis was actually ATF Special Agent Jay Dobyns. When my true identity was exposed, we began to get flooded with death and violence threats, me and my family. There were murder contracts placed on me. There was a written threat to kidnap and gang rape my wife. There were spoken threats and documented threats to kidnap my kids.
Jay, was your UC identity exposed through the normal court process, or did it get leaked prior to that?
No, it was originally exposed. My true identity was originally exposed just through normal court discovery. My name was on reports. There wasn't, when we turn over our reports to the defense team, there's no redactions in there. They can see what we did and who did it and what the names of the agents and officers were. Again,
you're getting threats. Yeah,
back to that abandonment and betrayal, man. That stings. And you can't expect a tiger to change his stripes. The Hells Angels are who they are. And just because they found out that they got tricked or deceived by an agent doesn't mean that they're going to stop being who they are. These threats start coming in, and ATF wouldn't react to them. They wouldn't follow up on them. They wouldn't chase them.
Isn't there well, you were talking about policy and procedure earlier. Isn't there a policy and procedure to when there's a credible threat on an agent's life that they've got to take some action, like move you out, protect you, do something?
Well, you would think, and there were some steps made. I'm not going to entirely point this 100% negative finger at ATF. They took some steps. I was relocated, but they were putting a Band-Aid on the cancer. They moved me from Tucson. They relocated me and my family, but they never addressed the threats. They never took steps to deal with the cancer. They just put a Band-Aid on the cut. And so the more threats that came in that were unaddressed, they were empowering the suspects. They were saying hey, look, we can threaten this guy. We can do all kinds of stuff. No one's going to do anything to us. No one ever came and knocked on my door. They had a letter written from the Hells Angel who murdered Cynthia Garcia. They had intercepted a letter out of the jail that said, we need to kidnap this guy's wife and gang rape her on videotape and make him watch it. See how he likes that. It was signed by the dude. You would think that the agency would go knock on his jail bars and say, dude, if nothing else, even if you're just puffing up for street talk, you can't do this. They never did anything.
See, if I saw a letter like that, I mean, it's why aren't people being jacked up? I mean, you may not be able to make a case, but you might be able to get some search warrants, send a message that says, if you're going to do this, you are going to pay a huge price. We're going to be the ones to deliver that to you. It just amazes me, because it goes back to backing up your people. Somebody makes a threat on a cop. People say, well, why do they get special attention? You know why? Because they are the protectors of society, because they do the job nobody else wants to do. And if we can't protect them, then who the hell is going to protect you?
So as these death and murder, death and violence threats stacked up and kept stacking and stacking with no action, I filed an internal complaint with ATF. Why is no one investigating these? Why are you not chasing these down? Why are you not at least confronting these people and saying, we know what you're saying, we know what you're doing, we know what you're planning, and it's going to end? Nothing. When I complained, some ATF executives who had a very retaliatory reputation then forced all my previously concealed personal information into the public domain. My house's address was no longer concealed or protected. It was made open source.
You got doxxed by your own agency?
They intentionally exposed me. They intentionally forced my personal, previously concealed information. They unmasked me and made it open source information. 3 months after the unmasking, my house was burned to the ground by arsonists. Confirmed, this is an arson. They had information from informants, from suspects, physical and all kinds of evidence that indicated the various players who had a hand in it. Those same people ignored real-time, credible information. Those same managers built a task force designed to frame me as the arsonist of my own house, and thus someone willing to murder his own family by fire. And they went all in. They went all in. They built a task force to frame me.
Well, let's put some exposition on this, though, because some of the people you're talking about are some of the same people who led the infamous Fast and Furious investigation, right?
Not only some of them, man for man.
So the same people who let guns walk across the border, that got a border agent killed, that resulted in how many deaths in Mexico, these are the same ones trying to set you up and frame you for setting fire to your own house?
At the same time that they were trying to frame me as the arsonist of my house, Border Patrolman Brian Terry was being murdered in the desert outside of Tucson with one of the over 2,500 guns that these same people allowed to be trafficked, knowingly and willingly allowed to be trafficked out of the United States to Chapo and his crew.
So when they revealed your information, they did away with your backstopping system completely.
The first and only time in the history of ATF that an undercover agent had been intentionally, willfully unmasked was me.
You know, I retired in 2013, and I won't go into detail, but DEA still has a backstopping system in place for me.
And rightfully so. And you know what? I think one thing that people don't understand is there's no witness security program for us. No. There's no witness security program for agents or officers.
Yeah, there's no WITSEC. There's no WITSEC for cops. Only for people who have violated the law or are, material witnesses in cases. But who's going to protect the people who are protecting the people that are in WITSEC?
One of the complaints I made in trying to argue this position and trying to fight back against this frame job, like this is all taking place in the Phoenix Field Division in Arizona. And I said, Sammy the Bull Gravano murdered 17 people for the Gambino crime family. Mm-hmm. He got witness protection for his testimony. He was relocated to Phoenix. While he was in Phoenix, as a member of the a witness protection program and under a new pseudonym and false identity, set up the biggest ecstasy ring in the United States. And you're still protecting that dude, but you won't go chase a death threat against my kids.
After an arson.
So ultimately, this case, it leads to a lawsuit, years and years of litigation, meetings with DOJ attorneys where they told me to my face, this case is going to go to trial. Everything that you're saying is going to be proven true. But guess what? You will never win because we can out-resource you. We have more attorneys than you have. We have more money than you have. So if you win, we'll appeal. And if you win
appeal
there,
you to death.
Appeal. And if you win there, we'll appeal. So just understand the fight you're getting into, because even if you win, we'll never allow you to win. And that's exactly what happened. We went to trial. We had a 3-week trial. Every substantive allegation that I made was true, was proven true from ignoring the death and violence threats to trying to frame me as the arsonist. All of them were proven true at trial.
Well, you know what they call DOJ? It's the world's largest law firm. And that's why, like you say, they can just out-resource you. I mean, but Well, Murph, this reminds me of the episode with Alex and how he got, the San Bernardino County Deputy Alex Collins left for dead by two other cops. I mean, they just left him out there and they got awards for this. And we went totally sideways on this. I'm trying to maintain, keep in check, but I'm telling you, to throw you under the bus like that after all you did, but it shocks me, but it doesn't shock me that to a man, everybody who was involved in trying to throw you under the bus was involved in one of the worst things that somebody could have pulled, like the Fast and Furious, that you say Brian Terry, a U.S. law enforcement officer, killed by the same guns that came. And who's been held accountable for Fast and Furious to today?
The exact same three people who were at the crux of Fast and Furious were also the leaders in trying to frame me as the arsonist. And not one thing, even after it was all proven true, not one thing happened to them. So
when you say the DOJ attorneys, is that actual DOJ attorneys or was that ATF attorneys?
I'm sorry.
That said, you can win in court, but you'll never beat us.
That was DOJ's attorneys, and at the time, I was I was in war mode. I was like, oh yeah, well we'll see. You don't know who you're dealing with. I naively didn't understand that they weren't lying to me. They were telling me the truth. Mm-hmm. They were not going to let me win. We won in court. We got the opinion from the trial court judge. They appealed it. It went to the circuit court, and the circuit court overturned the trial judge on a technicality, basically saying, all these things happened. We are not disputing the facts and evidence that were presented at trial, but there's nothing in place that says ATF or an agency has to do what you've challenged them on. There's nothing that says they have to investigate threats. There's nothing that says they have to protect you. You won the case, but you lost.
It's the difference between winning the battle and losing the war.
I'll tell you what, I still, in spite of what I went through, I still believe in our justice system. It did not treat me the way that I had hoped it would. But if the day ever comes where I stop believing that the truth will win, that the truth will come out, man, that's going to be a sad day in my life. Because even in spite of what I went through and knowing what I know, this is what I ultimately believe. The truth is the truth. And the truth is the same today as it will be a million years from today.
Yep. The truth doesn't change.
Yeah. Facts are a stubborn thing. As Winston Churchill said one time, they stay there forever. I'll tell you this too, with all this, on the back end of this, I do not live my life bitter. I'm not pissed off. I'm not resentful. I love ATF. I love the men and women with their boots on the ground. I love the great supervisors I worked for. I love what the agency stands for. I love DOJ, and I love the mission of what we cumulatively and collectively try to accomplish. I don't burn for anybody. The people that intended to harm me, I'm not waiting for them to get theirs. I'm not waiting for the karma gods to show up. Because if I do that, if I continue to live my life with resentment and anger, they've won. They've won. I don't wish any ill will towards anybody. I'm just moving forward and trying to have a good, positive attitude towards everything I touch. Well, before we get into your posting, let me leave you with just this Churchill quote, then we want to find out what you're working on. But it goes back to the truth, and I had to look it up to make sure I got it right. It says, truth is incontrovertible. Ignorance may deride it, panic may resent it, malice may destroy it, but there it is. And for you, the truth will always be there because there it is. I wish there was an easy way to say, man, I wish it was different. Wishes, if you had wishes in one hand and a pile of shit in the other, whatever. It's just... But I just feel bad as a citizen of the United States, as a taxpayer, that my money is going towards federal law enforcement like this, that they would treat one of their own like this. It surprises me, but it doesn't surprise me when we find out the three who were behind this. And there's a special place in hell, probably staffed by a couple cops.
You know what? I'll tell you what, that I think your statement is true. I do not wish that on them. I hope for them to receive forgiveness, and I hope that they, you know what? Here's the thing: what they did was malicious. It was retaliatory. It was resentful. It was wrong. It was actually criminal. But people make mistakes. People do things wrong. Sometimes they even do things wrong for the wrong reasons. Hopefully, they will learn personally. Hopefully, collectively, as an agency, we will learn to treat our agents better. I still have hope that good will come from all this, but like as to the individuals and to my agency, like collectively.
Well, you're a good man because you can forgive him. I mean, just personally, we've just only met over this, but we've got obviously a lot of people in common. I feel like I owe you something. And just as a citizen, for the work you did, for the stuff that you did, I feel like I owe you something. But I don't know what I can do for you other than help you, tell your story. But I tell you, if it was within my power, I would ensure is that equal justice under the law would apply, and that you are such a good guy because you want to forgive these guys. I want to hold their feet to the fire, and I want them to go through everything you had to go through so they can understand what it's like when you do your job and you are held to account the same way they tried to hold you to account off of something you never did. I mean, everything is proved that you didn't do it, but yet why they couldn't move on. I'm sorry. I got to stop here because I really will go sideways, and I'll ruin all the good work that you've done in this interview so far.
I'll tell you what the blessing in not having those threats run to the ground, and the blessing in not trying to truly find out who arsoned my house. The blessing in that is that if they had found out who tried to burn my house down on top of my family and identified them, Jay Dobyns' story would be much different right now, because I would have taken a freaking rifle and made that right. The fact that there's no one to point that rifle at, or there was no one to point that rifle at, is the blessing in it. Because if they weren't going to get this right, I would have got it right. And I'd be doing this interview from a jail cell right now.
Well, we have never done one from a jail cell, so we'd have to figure out the logistics, and we don't want to do it with you, brother. So, but
you know what? You've got to, you've all of us got to try to find like the silver lining. And so, you
are the master at it.
And that's my silver lining, is that the blessing was that they never tagged who tried to murder my family, because
do you have suspicions?
We would have found justice one way or another.
What are your suspicions?
Yeah, I think that I have pretty good suspicions. I think ATF has pretty good suspicions. And I think I know at least who knows. And I think I know who probably had a hand in it. I mean, to discuss that right now, it's speculation, and speculation gets us nowhere. It's just I'm.
But what I'm saying is, but you've got a pretty you in your heart, you probably have a pretty good idea, right?
I do, and the frustrating part is ATF does too.
Yeah,
and DOJ does too.
Yeah, of course they do. I tell you what. Well, anyway, look, let's cut that part of it off, because we want to end on a really positive note. Let's talk about what you've done post ATF, because, dude, you were very popular. I mean, you had Gerard Butler modeled one of his characters in a film about you. I mean, you got people in Hollywood modeling themselves around you. You've been on several documentaries. So what has life post ATF been like? What did you work on, and what are you working on now? Besides jaydobyns.com, go to JAYDOBYNS.com. All your books are there, your movie credits. You do some speaking, I think, and some other things, right?
Yeah, my life, once we got through that roller coaster of the threats and violence, actually became very happy and very peaceful. My family's intact. I work every day to repair some of the things I did.
How are the kids?
My kids are great. My kids are healthy and happy and productive. Gwen is still by my side and is way better than anything I ever deserved to have in my life. I did some training, some law enforcement training. I wrote that second book, that Catching Hell book. And probably what I'm most proud of is that I'm a high school football coach. I'm the head coach of a very small high school here in Tucson, Arizona, and when I came to the program 2 years ago, the program was 0-15 and the program was on the verge of being abolished because it was just such a dumpster fire. And in the last 2 years, we were 10-3. And I've taken a bunch of kids, bunch of young men who've I've grown very close to, and tried to take the lessons I've learned in life and translate them through football to these kids. And it's super satisfying. There's no pay in it. I'm living off my pension, which anybody that's pulling a government pension knows that there's nothing glamorous about it.
Not at all.
There's nothing spectacular about it. I don't get paid to do the job. I do the job because I want to. I do the job because I love it and because I love my boys.
Do they know your background?
Some of them do. Some of them don't. I don't push that on them. I think I don't make that a point of emphasis. I take a lot of those lessons learned, a lot of those stories from my background, and try to apply them and use them as teaching moments through football. But I don't push that on any of them.
Yeah, but kids who play football, when they find out, though, you play D1, that I mean, when you talk about Andre Reed, Jerry Rice, you say Doug Flutie, these kids got to be looking at you going, oh, that's cool.
Well, I think there's days when they love me, and like most coaches, I think there's days when they hate me.
Now, let me ask you, have you ever grabbed the face mask of one of the players and told them what you really thought about him?
What I went through as a player is no longer acceptable behavior from coaches.
And Murph, by the way, 0-15 sounds like your record. On what year was it? So you have something in common there. So
there you go. Hey,
every episode,
like I always say, you can be a leader or you can be a follower. I'm being a leader in the losing category.
Yeah. So every episode we'll do our small town police blotter funny stories, but then I'll pull up a story from the past, and I do mean the past. Sometimes it's the 1880s, the 1910s. What year was it? I give him 3 choices. Dude's like you got a better record than he does.
I think I got 3 or 4 last year.
Yeah, out of 30.
So,
which, by the way, is still the assistant coach's winning one loss against Nick Saban. He may have lost a couple, but he's still 25-2 against all assistant coaches. But I'm not a Tide fan. By the way, Murph, I got taken to task on Twitter by somebody that says, "Am I going to quit saying slanderous things about UGA now that they won 28-13?"
That's right.
It really wasn't about Georgia as much as Georgia beat Notre Dame one time, University of Arizona. I can't let it go. I'm sorry. I'm not like you, Jay. I can't forgive. I hold these things personal. There will be retribution. There will be another game, and we will win.
We'll
Go
work
Irish.
on that. We'll work on that. I'll help you through it.
Hey, loved it, Jay. We did an interview yesterday, and I had to wear my Georgia sweatshirt. So the 2 guys that were
let's be honest about this, Murph. You wore your Georgia sweatshirt for a total of 5 minutes because it's Florida and it's humid and it was too hot. So what's your loyalty to Georgia until you got uncomfortable? Then you took it off.
That's right. Did you have your shirt on? Oh, you didn't have a shirt. You didn't even have a team in the game, did you? That's right.
But for whatever, yeah. By the way, if Jay had worn his cut the same way that you wore the Georgia thing, he would have been thrown out of the gang, months ago. So anyway, hey, let's close on this.
He was a hell of a lot younger than I was yesterday.
Yes. Hey, let's close on this. Looking back, I don't want to do this. What's your biggest regret? What's this? That's kind of, you can look back and say all that stuff. Looking back, what part of your life probably impacted you the most today now? I mean, what things gave you the lasting impact, that when you think about stuff, you go, I made a good difference here. I did this, I did that. I don't know where the case fits into it. I don't know where Black Biscuit fits into it. But when you look back on your career and everything, what had the biggest impact on you?
We touched on this very early in our discussion. The biggest thing, the thing that I cherish the most, are the people that I cross paths with. I crossed paths with amazing people, especially in my professional career, that inspired me, that led me, that helped me, that guided me. People that when things were breaking bad and it was very unpopular to be Jay Dobyns' friend, stood by my side. Mm-hmm. And it's the people that's ultimately what I miss about the job. I don't miss the operations. I don't miss kicking doors or search warrants or undercover deals. I miss the people and the collective effort to come together to try to do something good. it's always the relationships and the people.
The camaraderie. That's what you miss. Same here.
Well, man, we are going on close to 4 hours. I mean, and we knew this was going to take some time. And so, let's bring this to a close. But I got to tell you, Jay, first of all, I'm a huge fan of just what you've done. Your book, like I said, I'm almost through the first one, and I'll finish the second one. But for you to be so very few people would put their life out there on the line like that for everybody to see and talk about it in the way that you did. So just from that standpoint, I think you have served law enforcement well because you were honest about your stories. Actually, I do have one final question for you. What advice would you have for people going into this profession today? Because it has totally changed from, my first job was in 82. I think you said yours was 84 or 87. And Steve, yours was what, 1842 or something like that?
1975, you old fart.
Oh, no, that was the new episode with Tim McGraw and Faith Hill, 1883 on Paramount Plus. It's the precursor to Yellowstone. But anyway, whatever. I realize this is too sophisticated for you. But what advice, when you're looking at it, would you give to people wanting to go into this profession, whether it's federal, state, tribal, state, local? What do you tell them?
I think any young person that's considering law enforcement is that it would be difficult in my mind to find a more noble profession. I think that it is the ultimate way professionally to give of yourself for the benefit of other people. And so it's not for everybody. Not everybody has that heart for it. Not everybody has that selflessness and that sacrifice. But we touched on this earlier. Everything you do in your career as a lawman, goes to serving someone else and goes to taking care of someone else. And if that's in your heart, it would truly be harder to find a more noble way to earn a living than to carry a badge and carry a gun and go out and put your life on the line to protect and defend others people's lives.
Very well said. And I know you won't agree with this because no true hero ever does, but you are a true hero for your actions, for the sacrifices, your commitment, your dedication, everything that brought this to a successful conclusion. Screw the people that tried to screw over you. They'll never understand what this badge of honor, this code of honor we have between us, what that's all about. They'll never understand that. They're bureaucrats. But I also want to recognize your wife and children, because they're are real heroes as well. We had my wife on the show here last week, I think, talking about, she got to talk about how great it is to be married to such a peach like me,
We filed that under our fiction section of the podcast. Yes.
But those are the unsung heroes in all of this. Our families, it's just like you said, not everybody's cut out to be a police officer, to be a public servant. Not everybody is cut out to be the spouse of a public servant either. I mean, the shit that she went through, the arson of her house, oh my gosh. I mean, I don't know any other police officer that's gone through that much. And when I say police officer, I'm talking about law enforcement professionals. So, from Morgan and I and all the listeners of Game and Crimes, God bless you. God bless Gwen. God bless both your children. You're true freaking heroes. And don't deny it, because I'll just have to keep talking, and we don't want that to happen.
No, that's very kind. And your audience can't see this because we're recording this with some video, but I'm looking at both you guys. You have your awards on the wall, and Steve, you got your challenge coins there and awards. And I think I don't know if you've noticed, but from behind me,
it's all your kids.
It's my family. It's my wife and my kids. Because of the unfortunate way my career ended at ATF, anything that I have that has ATF on it is now in the landfill. Mm-hmm. That was a way for me to cleanse that out of my life. But I appreciate you guys having me. I'm very flattered. I feel the same with the words you spoke about me. I feel the same way towards you guys and towards many of the people out there in your audience. And I hope that we gave them an entertaining podcast to listen to. I hope your audience likes it.
Well,
they will. Trust me. Like I said, but between Connie and you guys were tied for first in terms of who people wanted to hear from. So the fact that we got to hear it like this, what a great story. I guarantee you this is going to be an epic episode. Right,
and
Murph?
I hope, brother, I hope we get to meet in person someday so I can personally shake your hand. I really do.
Yeah.
Someday we'll do that. The first 10 beers are on me.
Lucky for you, I don't drink. How about the first 10 ginger ales?
Well, no, if he's drinking ginger ale, it means he's wired. He's a snitch.
That's what the cops used to think.
Murph would show up drinking ginger ale. Are you from OPR? What are you doing? You snitching on me? Anyway.
Irish cop doesn't drink, right?
That's right. Hey, this is me saluting you, sir. The audience can't see this. Thank you very much. Everybody, hang on. Stay tuned for the debrief. Man, if this story doesn't motivate you, and if it just doesn't make you just get down on your knees and thank God that there are people like Jay Bird Dobyns out there protecting folks like us from some of the most dangerous people to roam the streets, man. I don't know where your priorities are, but there's not enough I can do to thank Jay Bird for what he did for his community, for his state, for his country.
Absolutely. Javier and I both worked undercover. Never anything even close to what Jay did. Our undercovers were usually just meetings, might last an hour or two, usually in a decent location, but years living with these guys, partying with them, putting up with their crap, having to become a prospect and hang around and do their bidding, run and get hot dogs and, whatever it is they tell you to do. I mean, that's humiliating, I think. But, man, this guy just dedicated to his profession, focused on his mission. He did suffer a little bit, where he was kind of leaning towards the Stockholm syndrome, where he might be feeling a little bad for the bad guys. And at the end, Jay talks about how he had feelings for these guys when they found out he was a cop and how it negatively affected him because he had grown to have a little bit of friendship with some of these people. I don't want to say admiration because I don't think he admired them at all.
No.
But man, that's just one of the best freaking stories. And then here you got this badass tough guy who is now freely coaching high school football, not charging
for
them
free.
A penny.
And he takes them from 0-15 to 10-3 or whatever.
Outstanding. Outstanding.
Well, the other thing too is, and then when he talks about, I didn't realize it, but I tell you, I am insulted on his behalf. I'm pissed off on his behalf. The people that were also involved in this debacle called Fast and Furious, the one where Brian Terry, the border agent, was killed, the guns used, they were sent, into Mexico, used probably to kill hundreds of other people. The fact that these three guys, he says, to a man, were involved in screwing him over. Just to this day, I think, I can't.
Well, then
it just reminds me, Steve, real quick. It reminds me of the cops who left Alex Collins out there hanging out to dry.
Yeah,
there is. You show up at a convention, pal. Don't sit next to me.
Yep. And then accuse him of burning down his own house and trying to kill his own family. It's just disgusting. That is horrific. Those people need to be held accountable. But here we are getting on our soapboxes again.
Yes, we are. But hey, guys, you can listen to it. We got the books posted, on our episode page. Got some great pictures of Jay. There's just some great stuff. So look, what a great episode. And if you think that episode was great, we got more coming to you. But the only way you're going to find out is for us to finish this outro. So guess what? Go to Apple and Spotify. Hit those 5 stars. It's magic. We don't know how it works. We just know that it does. It really does help us, folks. And we really do appreciate it. So also head on over to gameofcrimespodcast.com for more information about the show as well. Also go to our newly established book page. Number 1 is Manhunters, of course. Steve always wants it there. He paid to have it placed first. It's like, the grocery store. Pepsi pays to have their, stuff put out in front of Coke. But anyway, go there. Also, we got a lot of good stuff. Also, head on over to patreon.com/gameofcrimes. If you think this stuff is good, we got great stuff coming up. And we may do a special episode with Jay Bird where we go in deep on just one topic and talk about stuff we're going to talk with him. Also, go over to paypal.com, use our email, gameofcrimespodcast@gmail.com or paypal.me/gameofcrimes. Whatever it makes it easier for you to support the show and help us bring you more exciting content. But again, I'm telling you, man, patreon.com. That's where it's at. We're working hard every month, really. Every month we're putting out a lot of content. Head on over there. But Steve, I got to tell you, man, if they thought this was good,
We got some really great interviews coming up. You're working on some others too right now. Just give them a quick tease about one of them you've just been working on.
Everybody knows about a DE agent who was kidnapped, tortured, and murdered repeatedly, not murdered once, but repeatedly in Mexico. That's Kiki Camarena. We're talking to an individual now, hope to get him on the show soon, who actually who was stationed there during Kiki's time, who actually participated in the manhunt and the subsequent investigation. You're going to hear the true story about Kiki Camarena. It's none of this bullshit that you hear on. There's one show out there called The Last Narc. He's going to put all those rumors to rest.
Yeah, put it to rest. Well, hey, we're going to put this episode to rest. And we're going to do it by saying thank you once again for playing the biggest, baddest, most dangerous game of all, the Game of Crimes.